Game number 3, we're playing the white pieces again. Our opponent's rating is creeping up slightly, 812. Pawn to e4, just like the last game. e5, knight f3, knight c6. And now instead of the Italian game, we see the Scotch game. Pawn to d4. We have a ChessGoals opening repertoire based on e4, and we recommend the Scotch game. So I do like this opening. I think at the sort of advanced beginner and early intermediate phases, the Scotch can be a super effective weapon where you grab that space early, you play for the attack, and give your opponent some tough questions to face right out of the opening. And here we see black already make a mistake. Bishop to b4 check. You might be thinking, how is that a mistake? It's a check. It develops a piece. Well, the problem with this move is we can play pawn to c3. We wanted our pawn there anyways. It helps support this big center so we can capture back if needed. But the problem is now the bishop has to move again. So we got a free move. And that free move in the opening is super valuable. If you look at a Stockfish eval here, it's already saying a 1.5 pawn advantage for white, just because black threw in that check. What black should have done is captured this pawn on d4. That's by far the best move. Instead, they check, we block, and now black sees this pawn double attacked on e5, and they put the bishop back on d6. There's a funny name for a bishop that's placed like this. It's called a tall pawn, because it's part of this pawn chain, and it just looks like a pawn. It's trapped by these two pawns. If you compare that to that bishop that we looked at in a prior game, that was helping support our passed pawn, but also trapped between two pawns, that bishop was a lot better because it was attacking the opponent and supporting a passed pawn, whereas this bishop is just playing extremely passive. That's not a good spot for the bishop. It also blocks this pawn, which blocks in the bishop on c8. So this is a difficult situation already. We develop bishop c4. That's where we wanted our bishop anyways. Knight to f6, pressuring this guy. We pin the knight, pawn to h6. Now here we have a big choice. We can either retreat the bishop and allow black to maybe play g5, and then they're going to try to play knight takes e4, or we can take the knight, which gives up the bishop pair. I like retreating the bishop, and that's what white did in the game. And here's why. Even though we may lose this pawn, what we're going for is a huge attack against the black king. That's in the spirit of the Scotch game opening. And this is something that I want you guys to think about as you're progressing in chess, is looking at different imbalances and how do you compare them. So one of the major imbalances in chess is what's the material count. And if one side's up a pawn, when we're beginners, we always think, well, that side's winning. They're already +1. But as you're reaching this intermediate level, you need to think about, well, what do we have in terms of compensation for the pawn? If this black king is in the center and we have better placed pieces and this g pawn's up and everything's exposed on the king side, well, I'll take that attack probably all day long at the cost of a pawn. So that's a little bit of foreshadowing of what we're about to see. Black plays g5, exposing this king side, right? g8 is not a very safe spot for that king anymore. And as we saw earlier, that bishop's trapped in, so the king can't get to the queen side quickly either. This king is stuck in the middle, and we're just waiting to attack it. Bishop back to g3, and black goes for the pawn. We take on e5. Now, this isn't the top engine move, but I like the spirit of this move. What we're trying to do is open up the e-file, castle our king, and put our rook onto e1. So that's kind of the goal. If we look at the top engine move here, it prefers to castle first, bring the rook to e1 next, and wait on this capture. And I think that in general is a better idea. You want to just develop quickly. Developing is super important. Get a new piece developed. And only do the pawn trade if you calculate that it's going to be better than sort of your default developing move. Okay, so we did take. Knight takes g3, h takes back. Black grabs this pawn on e5. So they go for that free pawn. Free in quotes. Now, at the moment, we have full compensation for the pawn. And the best move is knight takes e5. They take back, and then developing our knight. But in the game, we played queen to d5. So we went extra aggressive. And I do understand why. And I think it's a decent practical choice. We are double attacking this pawn. And it's a mate threat. Queen takes f7 with mate. And we're double attacking that bishop on e5. So we're threatening to win a piece. Queen e7, the logical move to defend both. But now look at the king and queen for black. They are lined up on the only open file on the board. We are just waiting to get a rook on e1. So we're going to castle. The idea is rook e1 coming. And now we see pawn to g4 by black. This is not a great move. It's similar to what we've looked at in the past with the one-move threats. g4 is a one-move threat. It attacks our knight. And I think the idea is black is trying to relieve some pressure on this bishop. Maybe they want us to take right away and get some trades since they're up a pawn. But the problem is sometimes the knight can find a stronger square. And in the game, knight h4 was played with the idea of knight f5 coming. The strongest move is to actually take here, though, because this queen is still tied down to the pawn. So black has to take with the knight. And now we can develop with this rook on e1, and we're getting a ton of play at the cost of just the one pawn. Okay, but knight h4 played in the game, trying to get to f5. And now we see knight to b4 by black. Why knight to b4? I don't understand this move. I think the problem is black is trying to get too fancy in terms of winning material, but they need to calculate that king is stuck in the center right now. Black does not have time to do a move like this. So the idea is if c takes b4, bishop takes b2, trapping the rook in the corner. That's the idea. Well, we can get away with it, and we do take. So c takes b4, bishop takes b2, knight to d2, connecting the rooks. Black gets that rook, we take back. The dust settles, and black is still only +1. But look at the black pieces currently. Starting square, starting square, starting square, starting square. Not much better than the starting square. We have 4 pieces developed. Queen, bishop, knight, knight. And this rook is ready to develop soon. If the e1 square were protected, rook to e1 would be game over right now. So this is very close to completely busted for black. They need to get the king to safety. c6 played, not a good move. Again, one move threat. Don't just make a one move threat unless there's a really good idea behind it. I think black wanted d5 next, but they have to calculate. Right here, it's black's move to improve. d6 would be much stronger than c6. Let's get that bishop out. Let's queenside castle. And if white doesn't play real actively, we probably get that plan in. Instead, c6, and white finds the strongest move, queen to d4. That's a great move because now we're counterattacking the rook. Black doesn't want to waste time moving that rook. Black needs to get the bishop on c8 into the game. And with this counterattack, we get to make the next aggressive move after black moves the rook. So rook f8 played. And here, knight to f5 is pretty much lights out. It would attack the queen. It would threaten knight to d6 check. The king has to move, and once that king moves, he's never getting to safety with a queenside castle. This was missed, though, and in the game, king f1 was played. Still a very good move, just not as direct as knight f5. And the threat here is rook to e1, hitting the queen to the king, and that's also going to be game over. Black's got to figure that out quick. They play queen takes b4. Too greedy. This is the sign of a beginner, right? As a beginner, you're thinking material first. Black just snagged that second free pawn. Well, I should say second free point. So they're +2 points now of material. But there's a huge tactical issue here, and white finds it immediately. These queens are lined up. This bishop can move with check. That means black loses the queen. This was played in the game. Take, take. So now we're +5. This is conversion mode. Queen d6. Grab this free pawn. Bring in a new attacker. Queen f4 check. Also attacking this pawn. Rook to d6 sets up a pin. So now we can just try to double attack this. Rook to e7 check is a very good move too. But knight f5 played. Double attack. Gets another trade. And here, black gets a little source of counterplay. There's a checkmate threat, but white's in time. Pawn f4. And here, white comes in for the kill with rook to e7 check. A great move. And now look at the queen and rook attacking. These two rooks are out of play. White's up a ton of material. They got queen for rook and the extra knight. Take. Bring the rook back. Knight to b1, threatening a mate. And there it is. 35 move victory. Pretty clean game by White. There was just a couple little things in there in the middle, but I love how White played so actively. So here are the key takeaways. 1, when you're castled and your opponent is not, opening up the center can give you great attacking options. So that we saw that in the game. And number 2, if your opponent's making one move threats, look for ways that you can just get out of those and create your own threats at the same time. And then 3, you should always develop your pieces. Even if you're already up material, look to bring new pieces into the game. That's got to be your default. And then the other thing is, when you are up material, you don't get extra points for checkmating your opponent quickly. This is a note from Matt. So first, make sure to stop any of their counterattacks and then focus on winning. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So you want to just make sure that you reduce the chances of your opponent coming back in the game. So reduce their counterplay and then secure your victory. All right, game number 3, another E4 game, Scotch game. We'll see you guys in game number 4.